Hello everyone. In this lecture, we'll be dealing with the data path section of a JC62 machine. So first of all, I want to address why are we even studying about the JC62 machine? Why are we so concerned about it? Despite the fact that we'll never ever be using it. Apart from the JC62 simulator that you would be using for your lab assignments, you will not be dealing with this machine ever again in your life. So why even bother to study it? So the answer is pretty basic. It helps you understand the basics of the computer architecture. If your concepts are clear, then you can always build on that. And GC62 helps us build those concepts as to what exactly happens internally in a digital computer. So that is why we have to study JC62 in order to get our concepts clear. Alright, starting with the components of a digital computer. We have two functional parts in any traditional digital computer, the data path section and the control section. The data path section deals with the processing of data, and the control section basically tells the data path section what next step should the data path section perform in order to complete the instruction, and the control section does it via control signals. We will be discussing about the control section in detail later on, but as of now, we can know that control section can be either hardwired or microprogrammed depending upon a computer. The scope of this lecture, however, is to discuss the data path section and its structure in detail. So this is what the data path section of a JC62 machine looks like. You can see various boxes here, sort of pipelines, and we will be going about and discussing each of it in detail. So these blocks here, as you can see, are basically registers. Okay, this is my program counter. This is the memory address register. This is basically our memory. This is the memory data register. This is what we call the accumulator. This is the arithmetic logical unit. This is my P register, and this is my instruction register. Alright, we are done with the nomenclature of each of these blocks. Now let's move ahead. These triangular things that are there in a few of these boxes, actually all of them apart from the RAM and the ALU, signify the clock. Clock helps to keep our program synced throughout. Alright, that is all you should want to know about this. These things right here, these arrows, these IP, LP, EP, you can see them everywhere. There are 16 of them, and these are our control signals. The things that we said that the control section controls in order to tell the data path unit what instructions, what things to do next. Alright, so these are my control signals. You can notice that many of these control signals have an L or a E start in front of them. These basically stand for load or enable. L stands for load, E stands for enable. Okay, before load and enable, I would like to explain you what these things are. These pipeline sort of things are basically the buses. Now in JC62, as I mentioned, we deal with addition or subtraction of integers. So these integers that are processed in a JC62 machine are of 12 bytes, of 12 bits, not bytes, sorry, of 12 bits, and the address where these integers are stored is of 8 bits. It is similar to I live in a house and my name is of 12 bits. I'm that integer. I am 12 bits long, and the house where I live in is 8 bits long. The address of that particular house is of 8 bits. Okay, so the data is of 12 bits and the address where that particular data is stored is of 8 bits. Fine. So these are my buses, data buses, and these are connected to the registers. How memory or data transfer happens is I can either transfer data from the bus to the register or from the register to the bus. Okay, whenever I want to transfer my data from the bus to a register, I say that I'm loading that particular register. I'm loading the data onto the register. So that is when we use the load instruction or the load signal. And whenever I want to transfer my data from a register to the bus, I use the enable signal. So load is transferring from bus to the register and enable is transferring from the register to the bus. Alright, I think we have covered the basics a little bit. Now we'll delve deep. Fine. This is a program counter. It basically points to the next instruction of the program that I need to perform. Alright, this does not hold that particular next instruction. It basically points to the next instruction in the program. It has three control signals. The increment program counter. See, if I'm performing a particular instruction right now, then I know that I should be performing the next instruction. Alright, if I am at instruction number 8, for example, I know that next instruction that I need to perform is instruction number 9. So program counter will increment with the help of the increment program counter control signal and point to the 9th instruction now. Given that 8 is not a branching instruction, that we'll study later on, but as of now, what IP does is it increments the program counter to point to the next instruction that we need to perform. LP is load program counter, that is we will load the address of the next instruction into the program counter, and enable program counter is that we will transfer the address of the next instruction to be performed from the program counter to our bus. See, program counter deals with the address of the next instruction, hence it is connected to a 8-bit bus. Anywhere you see the address, the registers that deal with the address are connected to a 8-bit bus, and the registers that deal with the actual data are connected to the 12-bit bus. Alright, so I hope program counter is now clear. Moving on to this portion. This helps us deal with the memory. This is the memory address register. This is my RAM, my memory, and this is my memory data register. As you can see that the RAM is not directly connected to the bus. It is only via memory address register and memory data register that I can actually access the RAM. Alright, so what we basically do is typically we transfer the address of the memory that we want to access to the memory address register. It goes on to that memory address. Whatever data is stored at that particular address is then loaded into the memory data register, and from memory data register it moves on to the bus. So, that is how it happens. I give memory address register the address of the data that I want to access. It goes on to the RAM, and that particular data is fetched through the MTR. We cannot access the RAM directly. As you can see, the memory address register only has the load instruction. Okay, I can only load the address from the data bus to the memory address register, and from here it goes on to the RAM. Here there is a direct connection. The MAR is directly connected to the RAM, hence we do not need an enable signal, because the communication is not happening between the bus and MAR, rather between the RAM and MAR that are directly connected. It is only to interact with the bus that we need the load and enable signals. Fine. This is the RAM. It has two signals, read and write. Whenever I want to write to any particular location, I'll use the W signal. Whenever I want to read a particular location, I'll use the R control signal. Then we have MDR connected to a 12-bit bus. Alright, we have the load data, enable data, both these control signals, and the clock. Fine. So I hope this memory portion is clear. You give the data whichever you want to access, its address to the MAR, it goes on to that particular memory address. If suppose it was a read instruction, the we will enable here means turn on. We'll turn on the read signal. Whatever data is stored there, we will bring it to the MDR, from where it will be brought on to the bus. Okay, so this is my memory section, this is my program counter section. Why MDR has both load and enable signals? Because MDR can either store data from the bus into itself, or it can transfer data from MDR to the bus. That is why it has both load and enable signals. This is to deal with the bus. Alright. Now moving on to the accumulator register. Fine. Here also we have two signals, the load accumulator or the enable accumulator. See, I am saying that this particular thing, the JC62 machine, does addition and subtraction operations. How it does it? The operation itself happens in the arithmetic logical unit. So I can either turn on the subtract control signal or the addition control signal of the arithmetic logical unit. Then I have the EU or the enable unit signal here. So what basically happens is I have some particular data stored in my accumulator and some particular data stored in my P register. I add these two things, fine, and the added result, the addition is done in the ALU and the result is also stored in the ALU. That is why I only have an enable unit control signal here, because I have starting over. Okay, I have some particular data that through the bus is loaded into the accumulator via the load accumulator signal. Then from the accumulator it can directly go to the ALU. There's a direct connection. I have another piece of data that is loaded into the B register. See, B register has a load signal but not an enable signal, which means I can load data into it. And why is there no enable signal? Because from B I cannot transfer directly to the bus, but from B I can transfer directly to the ALU because there's a direct connection. 1212 here signifies that I am transferring actual data values. So from accumulator and B register, my data will go into ALU, and then depending on what operation it is, addition or subtraction, my ALU will perform that particular operation, and using the enable unit signal, it will then transfer it to the main bus. Alright. I hope this entire thing made sense. You can load things into the accumulator. Accumulator kind of acts as a storage register, and so does B. This is where you store the particular data that needs to be processed on. ALU is what does the processing and then transfer the processed data back to the bus. This is my instruction registers. Okay, so what instruction I actually want to perform, it is fetched in the instruction register. The actual instruction, if the instruction is add a comma b, that actual instruction is stored here. Alright, that is why it is connected to the 12-bit bus, because here I am storing the actual data. Program counter points to the location of the next instruction, whereas the instruction that is to be performed, that is being performed, is stored in the instruction register. This also has the load instruction and the enable instruction control signals. Fine. Now this bus, this has 4 written on it. In the later on series, if we continue this, we'll have the opcode, which is of 4 bits. That is why the instruction register is connected to the control unit via a 4-bit bus. And again, this NF, this negative flag, is also connected to the control signals, because suppose if I subtract two numbers and the answer is negative, so suppose the answer is -8. So instead of storing 8, or instead of storing -8, the ALU will store 8 and it will turn on the negative flag, which is communicated to the control unit, that this particular answer is negative. So negative flag helps us keep track of the negative answers in the ALU. Fine. This is the control unit. We will study about this in detail later on. And these 16 represents that this basic control unit controls the 16 control signals that we can see in each of these things, each of these registers. Fine. So let us take one last glance onto this block diagram of the structure. This is my program counter, stores the address of the next instruction to be performed. It has increment program counter, load program counter, and enable program counter. This is my memory address register. I can never access the memory directly. I'll have to tell the memory address register which particular address of the memory I want to access, and that particular data is then stored in the MDR from where it can be brought to the bus. In order to communicate with the bus, we must use either load or enable control signal. Fine, these 8-bit buses signify that address is being transferred. 12-bit buses signifies that database is being transferred. This is the accumulator. This is my B register where data is stored. An operation is performed on that data in the arithmetic logical unit, which then transfers the answer to the bus using the enable unit control signal. This negative flag tells the control unit that the answer for this particular problem was negative. Then we have the instruction register that stores the instruction, the actual data of the instruction that we are performing. It also has two control signals, load instruction register and enable instruction registers. Almost all of these registers have a clock that helps to keep the process synchronized. This is my control unit. Even this has a clock. 16 here represents the 16 control signals that are connected to these. And this is it. This is the data path section of a JC62 machine. Thank you.